When I started running D&D, I thought I would be a great DM because I was a writer. I thought that because I knew how to tell interesting stories, to weave narratives in an engaging way, and to keep the audience trapped with my story, I was more qualified to excel at this art. I was wrong. I failed to notice the key difference between D&D and telling stories. Choices. Allow me to elaborate. Welcome to Arcadian. This is the DM's Den, a place to share tips and experiences with dungeon masters, writers, and storytellers in general. And today, I'd like to talk about what I believe to be the most important advice for dungeon mastering: the importance of meaningful choices. You see, I was not terribly off the mark. My background as a storyteller does give me a very useful skill set to help my DMing. My ease to come up with fluid, even poetic descriptions, for example, is a muscle that I've trained because of that. However, that's only a tool on my belt. And having a hammer on your belt does not make you a blacksmith. D&D and RPGs are very different from books in one vital aspect. They are not about the story. They're about choices and their consequences. They're about what the players do, how that affects the story, and creates this unique experience that a different group playing the very same campaign would never achieve. It doesn't matter how interesting your campaign premise is or how deep your world feels. If your players are not allowed to dictate the course of their own story, you're not DMing. You're writing a book to a live audience with a little input from time to time. To talk a bit about my personal experience, this choice-centric narrative is what drew me to D&D. That's one of its main assets. It gives me the ability to live another life whose course I can decide in a world that reacts to those choices. It's also what made me start watching D&D streams like Critical Role. Finally, I was watching a story unfold where anything could happen. There was no story I could predict, no plot armor to save the characters' lives when they make stupid decisions. Everything was possible. If you remove that aspect from the game, you are taking away its biggest strength. When this happens, and DMs force their players to follow a predetermined path, it is only a matter of time until they make a choice that the DM is not expecting, that takes them away from that path. And to protect their carefully planned plot, the DM will use any means possible to redirect the players to the main path, effectively nullifying the choice they made. This is a behavior known as railroading, and it is never good. For sure you heard that term already, but probably you heard it being used wrongly. Unlike what many people think, railroading is not presenting a campaign with a linear progression. If we were to use that definition, most D&D campaigns would be railroads. Let's use Star Wars as an example. If you're running the Battle of Yavin and the rebels tell your characters that the only weak spot of the Death Star is that one exhaust port, that is not a railroad. I mean, it is certainly a choke point in your story that makes it linear, but they can fly an X-Wing down there and take the shot just like Luke, or they can hijack an enemy TIE fighter and kamikaze it against the weak spot when no one expects it, or they can even decide an alternative way and manually detonate, a mega proton bomb smuggled inside the Death Star. Notice that I'm not saying that all of these are guaranteed to succeed, or even possible at all. That's not the point. But even if you really wanted them to take the option that Luke took in the movie, as long as you allow them to choose any other option they want, and you don't force them to choose a single path you determined, it is not a railroad. Don't confuse linearity with railroading, because it's perfectly possible for a non-linear campaign to be a railroad. Rise of Tiamat is a great example of this. In certain episodes, the players get to choose what adventure they want to pursue next. It is non-linear, or at least branching by design. But in several episodes, the players are sent to retrieve these magical dragon masks. So they venture through the dungeon, they beat the boss, and they retrieve the mask, only to discover that it was a fake, or someone stole it before, or any other excuse to prevent the players from actually stopping the bad guy from assembling all five and summon Tiamat in the end. This is railroading at its worst. The players made a choice, and because the DM, or in this case the designer, didn't agree with it, or because they needed something to play out in a very specific way, they negated the players' choices, and worse, their achievements. There's a big discussion to be had around railroading and choices in general. Some people say that to each their own, and some players prefer this style of play, and some others say that it doesn't matter if you're on rails as long as the train is heading to Awesome Town. And I'm not saying that you can't have fun with a railroad. I played and ran a few of those, but now, with some experience, I'd argue that when DMs cancel out their players' choices, in essence, they're saying that they know better than the players. I think that's inherently wrong. And even though you can absolutely have fun in a railroad, there's even more fun to be had when the players can weigh in on what kind of game they want to play. Anyway, this was pretty generic advice so far, so let's move to slightly more advanced tips. You see, it is fairly intuitive that choices are what makes D&D a good role-playing game. The more you allow your players to dictate the course of their adventure, the better and more immersive your game can be. Because it's not as easy as overwhelming your players with choices. There are two fundamental points to handling choices: making them meaningful and consequential. Meaningful choices are the ones that are made with some level of awareness of what the options actually entail. Your players must be able to distinguish between the options, or else it is not a choice at all. Let's contextualize. You're in a dungeon, and you want to give choices to your players, so you present them an intersection and ask if they want to go left or right. This is not a choice at all. There is nothing the players can gather to distinguish the consequences of going left versus going right, so the decision will be made randomly. A choice is an informed and weighted decision, so you must present your players some clues to help them make a meaningful decision. For example, you can say that the left path seems to have cobwebs at the distance, but the right one doesn't have any light and is pitch black. Now, they can choose between the possibility of facing a giant spider or going into the dark and losing themselves. The choice just gains some meaning. Also, be aware of false choices. For example, imagine your players need to go from Heraklion City to Cape White. They ask what are their options, and you inform them that they can either travel through a dense forest and cross a frigid mountain, which will take about 1 month of hard effort, or they can go on a cozy boat and get there in a week. This is not a choice either. One option is blatantly better than the other. They will always pick the boat. Not only should you give your players choices, you should also strive to give them good ones. And good choices are always conflicting. For example, they can take the boat, but dangerous sea monsters have been roaming that region. There is a high chance they are attacked mid-trip. Now they have to weigh in the pros and cons. Now it's truly a choice. And I'm not even going to talk about the illusion of choice here. It's a cheap trick, just don't do it. The idea is to give your players a choice, like the two paths in our dungeon. However, you secretly know that whatever path they choose, they will always face a giant spider. There were never two paths, you just created one and placed a fake intersection to make the players feel like they had a choice. Whatever direction they pick, that will become your one true path. Choices should have clear and preferably distinct outcomes. As a player, I hate it when DMs use illusion of choice. Even worse than the fragility of this scenario, I mean, what if the players want to come back and explore the other path? If found out, it makes the DM lose their credibility. This really is no different than a very subtle railroad. And what about consequences? That should be fairly obvious. The biggest payoff of a player choice is the consequence it will produce. Not only you should assure different choices will have different consequences, it is very important to make the players realize that. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is excellent at this. Throughout the game, you will have to make many choices, which will dictate the ending of your story. And from romantic to geopolitical consequences passing through the end story for certain NPCs, when you reach the end of the game, you are shown this little montage telling you the game's after story and how every choice you made painted that specific ending. It was amazing when I got to the end of the game and saw that for the first time. It made me feel like I could play that game a dozen times and get a different ending every time. And because of that, I felt like my choices mattered. In other words, I felt like I did that. I saved Ciri, I chose Yennefer, I doomed Emrys. and that was a very powerful feeling. We will talk more about The Witcher 3 in a future video. Look for it in the eye up there when it comes out. Now, it's a bit tricky to telegraph to your players what is the consequence of every choice they make, but at least try to give them a hint or two, so they won't end up doing something whose consequences they really didn't want. And whatever you do, make sure they understand the connection between the choice and the consequence. If they don't, it will feel as if you're just making unconnected descriptions. They need to feel like they did that. That's the direct consequence of a very specific choice they made. That's where the payoff lives. As a final note, don't be afraid to cut some choices and only present the important ones. If you think about it, when your characters want to go from point A to point B, you don't need to ask them what path they take in every single road intersection. This might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but drowning your players in choices will dilute the weight every individual choice has. While this is not a very easy concept to master, it is okay to think of your game as a series of meaningful choices. Sometimes you can jump or time skip between two relevant ones and throw off the interlude in the middle. You will have to find the right balance for your group between not overwhelming them with too many choices and not giving them too little and cutting down their freedom. Whatever you do, just make sure to populate your adventure with loads of opportunities for your players to take their destiny in their own hands and truly feel like they're living their story. It's more fun for you, it's more fun for them, and one of the biggest pleasures as a DM, after all, is to discover as a mere spectator what your players are going to do next, not knowing what it will be. What was the choice with the biggest consequences you ever made in a game? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's share some ideas. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider watching another one. There's a whole playlist for you right here. I'm the first Arcadian. This was the DM's Den. And do or do not, there is no try.